The polished marble floors of the luxury mall weren't just clean, they were mirrors, reflecting the towering glass storefronts and the almost blindingly bright recessed lighting above. Every surface seemed designed to intimidate with its perfection. The air itself felt curated, a delicate, almost sterile blend of expensive perfumes drifting from unseen sources, mingling with the sharp, rich aroma of artisanal coffee brewing somewhere nearby. It was an environment built for the elite, whispering exclusivity with every gleaming corner. Amidst this calculated opulence, a figure moved with deliberate anonymity. Tom Hanks, obscured beneath the brim of a simple black ball cap and shielded by dark sunglasses, navigated the wide corridors. His attire, an unbranded black t-shirt, unremarkable jeans, hands casually tucked into pockets, acted as camouflage, allowing him to dissolve into the periphery. One of Hollywood's most profoundly recognizable faces was, for now, just another shadow. He wasn't here for leisure. Disturbing whispers had reached him first. Vague accounts passed through associates. Then came the stark, undeniable evidence. A growing number of scathing online reviews, painting a consistent and ugly picture of prejudice thriving within the very walls of his mall. Comments spoke of snobbery, outright dismissal, and a pervasive culture where worth was measured solely by visible wealth. The contrast between the mall's pristine image and the reported experiences was jarring, prompting this incognito reconnaissance. This sprawling monument to consumerism technically bore his investment's signature, but today, as he observed its hidden social mechanics, he felt profoundly like an outsider, an investigator in hostile territory. His gaze sharpened, snagging on a tableau unfolding outside a brightly lit, high-end jewelry store. Inside, a woman impeccably dressed, dripping subtle indicators of wealth, was being positively fawned over by two attendants. Their smiles were wide, almost unnervingly solicitous, as they offered her a delicate flute of champagne. Their conversation, muted by the thick glass, nonetheless radiated easy intimacy and privilege. Only moments later, a couple approached the same entrance. Their clothes were clean, neat, respectable, yet lacked the obvious designer labels. They paused at the threshold, a visible wave of hesitation passing between them, their body language broadcasting their discomfort in this rarefied atmosphere. They stepped inside, approaching the counter tentatively. Silence. The two attendants, previously so animated, now seemed intensely focused on polishing already gleaming surfaces, deliberately avoiding eye contact. No greeting was offered. An awkward, heavy quiet stretched, thick with unspoken judgment. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, one attendant glanced up, not making eye contact, and asked in a flat, disinterested tone that could only be boredom or thinly veiled contempt, "Can I help you?" The couple, visibly flustered, exchanged a look, murmured a quiet, "No, just looking," and retreated deeper into the store, their shoulders slightly slumped. Meanwhile, the first woman continued her effortless, laughing exchange with the other attendant. A familiar, cold knot, the kind born from witnessing casual, unnecessary cruelty, tightened in Mr. Hanks's stomach. This wasn't just poor service. It was a deliberate, systemic othering, exactly as the reviews had described. He'd hoped the complaints were exaggerations, isolated incidents. Seeing it play out so blatantly, so callously, ignited a slow burn of indignation within him. This wasn't some abstract problem happening elsewhere. It was happening here, now, funded indirectly by him. He forced himself to keep walking, pushing down the immediate urge to intervene, reminding himself he needed the full picture. He meticulously absorbed more details, the subtle way other shoppers subtly steered clear of those deemed lesser. The almost imperceptible tightening around the eyes of certain employees when approached by customers who didn't fit the mold. And the ever-watchful, assessing gaze of a security guard strategically positioned near a main intersection, his posture radiating bored authority. Hanks had seen countless depictions of such dynamics on film sets, stories exploring the brittle hierarchies of wealth and status. But watching it unfold organically, poisonously, within an entity connected to his name, felt nauseatingly personal. Taking a slow, deliberate breath to steady his nerves, Tom Hanks decided a more direct approach was necessary. Observation was one thing. Experiencing the barrier himself was another. He chose his target, the men's high-end boutique, its window display a stark, minimalist arrangement of impeccably tailored suits and handcrafted leather shoes. The message was clear: exorbitant taste required. As he neared the entrance, the store manager, a man whose own suit probably cost more than Hanks's entire outfit, glanced up from adjusting a tie on a mannequin. A flicker of professional assessment crossed his face, instantly categorizing Hanks based on his simple attire, followed by a subtle but unmistakable look of dismissive impatience. The manager turned back to his task, physically signaling that Hanks wasn't worth his time. Before Hanks could even cross the threshold, a solid presence blocked his path. It was the security guard he'd noticed earlier, tall, broad-shouldered, radiating an air of low-level authority. "Hey!" The guard's voice wasn't just sharp, it was accusatory, instantly placing Hanks on the defensive. "You lost? What are you doing hanging around here?" Mr. Hanks turned slowly, deliberately keeping his movements unhurried, his expression neutral behind the dark lenses. He let his gaze briefly scan the guard's uniform, the crisp black shirt, the official-looking badge pinned slightly crookedly. "Just looking," he replied, his voice carefully modulated, calm and even, drawing perhaps unconsciously on decades of maintaining composure under scrutiny. The guard clearly wasn't buying it. "Don't recognize you," he stated flatly, a challenge in his tone. He crossed his thick arms over his chest, a classic power stance meant to intimidate. "This section of the mall, it isn't for just anyone, you know." There it was again, that phrase, echoing the online complaints, solidifying the ugly truth. Mr. Hanks felt a brief, intense flicker of anger. He could end this right now. Flash his ID, make one phone call to the mall's general manager. Watch this guard's smug certainty crumble into panicked apologies. The thought was tempting, a quick surge of power to counter the guard's petty tyranny. But no, revealing himself now would only address the symptom, not the disease. He needed to understand the system that empowered this guard, this attitude. He needed more. So he suppressed the urge, offering only a slight, almost imperceptible nod, refusing to engage, refusing to argue or show offense. He simply took a step back, turned with quiet dignity, and walked away down the gleaming corridor. He could feel the guard's eyes on his back, radiating smug satisfaction at having successfully policed his perceived territory. That night, sleep would be elusive. The guard's dismissive tone, the casual arrogance of that phrase, "This place isn't for just anyone," would replay in his mind, a grating reminder of the invisible yet very real walls erected within the polished confines of his own investment. How many others had been turned away, made to feel small, simply because they didn't look the part? The following day dawned bright and clear, the California sun glinting sharply off the mall's expansive glass facade. Inside, the morning rush was beginning, a stream of shoppers flowing through the pristine hallways. Tom Hanks returned, a man on a mission, his disguise unchanged. The same black t-shirt, the same sunglasses, the same nondescript baseball cap pulled low. Consistency was key to this unwelcome experiment. He didn't need the armor of expensive labels today. His very lack of them was the point, the variable being tested against the mall's ingrained biases. Almost immediately, he spotted his foil from the previous day. The same security guard, stationed near the entrance to the luxury wing, his gaze performing its familiar sweep, instantly categorizing shoppers into belonging and suspicious. As Mr. Hanks approached, the guard's eyes narrowed slightly. A flicker of recognition, perhaps not of the individual, but of the type he represented, someone incongruous in this environment of curated wealth. The guard's posture stiffened, annoyance replacing his bored surveillance. With an air of self-importance, radiating practiced authority far exceeding his actual pay grade, he strode purposefully towards Hanks. "You again?" His voice was louder this time, tinged with impatience. "Look, I thought I told you yesterday. This area—" Mr. Hanks stopped, maintaining his calm demeanor, though a quiet storm was brewing inside him. "Is there a specific rule?" he asked, his voice deliberately soft, forcing the guard to lean in slightly, "that prohibits window shopping?" The guard let out a short, humorless smirk. It was the expression of someone who felt they held all the cards. "Come on, man," he said, lowering his voice conspiratorially, as if doing Hanks a favor. "Let's not make trouble, okay? It just isn't the place for you. Why don't you just move along? Go check out the food court or something." The condescension was thick enough to taste. "This isn't the place for you." Mr. Hanks absorbed the words, the casual dismissal, the assumption of his inferiority. He understood with chilling clarity. It wasn't about loitering or causing a disturbance. It was purely about his perceived socioeconomic status, judged solely on his simple clothing. He was an anomaly, a disruption to the carefully crafted illusion of uniform affluence. He knew, with a certainty that settled like ice in his gut, that he wasn't the first person this guard, this mall, had judged and found wanting, and he certainly wouldn't be the last. But this time, he vowed silently, the narrative would shift. This wouldn't end with quiet retreat. Ignoring the guard's implied threat, Hanks continued his deliberate path deeper into the mall, heading towards the main cafe. Not because he desired coffee, but because he needed more data points for his grim assessment. He could feel the prickle of judgmental glances from other shoppers, their eyes lingering a moment too long, their expressions ranging from curiosity to disdain. The air conditioning felt suddenly colder. Inside the bustling cafe, the established pattern played out with depressing predictability. Ahead of him in line, a woman adorned in expensive athleisure wear, carrying a designer handbag, was greeted with effusive warmth by the barista. "The usual, darling, oat milk latte, extra hot?" The woman laughed, a musical sound that filled the space. "Oh, Marco, you know me so well. You're the best." Then it was Mr. Hanks's turn. The barista's smile didn't just fade, it vanished, replaced by a look of weary impatience. The friendly demeanor evaporated, leaving behind a clipped, almost robotic efficiency. "Yeah, what do you want?" "Black coffee, please, to go." The order was punched into the register with aggressive taps. "$1.75. Cash or card?" the barista demanded curtly. already looking past him towards the next customer, before Hanks had even reached for his wallet. He couldn't help but glance back. The darling ahead of him was still chatting amiably, her latte being prepared with care, payment seemingly an afterthought. It wasn't merely bad or rushed service. It was a clear, calculated difference in treatment. A two-tiered system operating in plain sight, courtesy and credit for the perceived elite, suspicion and haste for the rest. The security guard had materialized near the cafe entrance, arms crossed, observing Hanks with undisguised scrutiny, as if waiting for him to cause trouble. Mr. Hanks paid, took his simple paper cup, and walked away, the bitter taste in his mouth having nothing to do with the coffee. He found an unoccupied bench near the food court, the central hub of the mall's more democratic offerings. From this vantage point, he witnessed another quiet, soul-crushing incident. A young man, perhaps a student, dressed in simple jeans and a hoodie, sat alone at a table, studying a menu. A waiter approached, took his order, scribbled it down. But just as the waiter turned to leave, the restaurant's manager, identifiable by his slightly more formal attire and anxious demeanor, hurried over and whispered something urgently in the waiter's ear, casting a pointed glance towards the young man. The waiter nodded, looking uncomfortable, and disappeared towards the kitchen. He never returned to the table. The young man waited patiently at first, then looked around, confused, a flush rising on his neck. After several minutes of being conspicuously ignored, the humiliation became too much. He gathered his backpack, stood up abruptly, and walked quickly out of the food court, his head down. Mr. Hanks closed his eyes for a long moment, the sheer, grinding injustice of it all settling heavily in his chest. It wasn't just about rudeness. It was about actively denying service, about making people feel unwelcome, invisible. Just then, the familiar, grating voice of the security guard broke through his thoughts. He'd apparently followed him. "Seriously, dude." The guard sighed dramatically, as if Hanks were a persistent annoyance. "What part of leave don't you understand? I already told you, this isn't your place." The guard's tone was harder now, his patience clearly gone. Mr. Hanks slowly turned to face him. He clenched his fists tightly at his sides, not out of immediate anger, but out of a deep, crystallizing resolve. Enough observation, enough analysis. Tomorrow, he would return not as an observer, but as the owner, and the reckoning would begin. The following morning, the luxury mall shimmered with its customary air of untouchable elegance. Sunlight streamed through the vaulted skylights, illuminating the pristine marble floors and reflecting off the polished chrome fixtures. The carefully engineered atmosphere of exclusivity was palpable. Tom Hanks entered through the main doors, his attire unchanged, the uniform of his undercover investigation. Black t-shirt, sunglasses shielding his eyes, baseball cap pulled low. To the casual observer, he was the same unremarkable figure from the past 2 days. But today was different. Mingling discreetly with the well-heeled shoppers, strategically positioned throughout the mall, were several individuals who radiated a quiet, professional alertness. They wore no flashy badges or mall security uniforms, yet their presence was subtly commanding. These were Mr. Hanks's personal security detail, briefed and ready, their purpose not to intimidate, but to observe and ensure the situation unfolded without unwanted escalation. He walked slowly, deliberately, through the main concourse, his senses heightened, anticipating the inevitable encounter. He didn't have to wait long. Emerging from a side corridor, the familiar security guard spotted him. The guard's initial expression was one of annoyed surprise, quickly hardening into outright irritation. This persistent annoyance was back. His stride purposeful, bordering on aggressive. He marched directly toward Mr. Hanks, clearly intending to escalate the situation immediately. "All right, that's it. I warned you 3 times," the guard barked, his voice loud enough to draw glances from nearby shoppers. "You're out of here, now." He reached out as if to grab Mr. Hanks's arm. Mr. Hanks stopped, stood his ground calmly, and met the guard's hostile gaze without flinching. "Good morning," he said, his voice unexpectedly quiet, yet carrying an unmistakable firmness that cut through the guard's bluster. The guard paused, thrown off balance by the lack of fear, the unexpected calm. He still didn't recognize the globally famous face hidden beneath the cap and sunglasses. But something in the man's unwavering gaze, his quiet confidence, planted a seed of doubt. He hesitated, his hand hovering uncertainly. "Look," he stammered, trying to regain his authoritative footing. "I told you." "Are you absolutely certain?" Mr. Hanks interrupted, his voice still soft but now edged with steel, "that you want to physically remove me from this property?" The guard instinctively crossed his arms again, a defensive posture now rather than an aggressive one. You're trespassing. You're not welcome here," he insisted, though his conviction wavered. A very faint, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of Mr. Hanks' lips. It wasn't a smile of amusement, but of impending revelation. "That's a fascinating perspective," he said, his voice carrying slightly, drawing more attention. "Particularly interesting because, you see, I own this place." The statement hung in the air, heavy and unbelievable. The guard stared, his mouth slightly agape, processing the impossible words. Just as he was about to retort, perhaps with a scoff or a threat to call the police, an anxious, high-pitched voice sliced through the tension. "Mr. Hanks, is everything all right?" It was the manager of the men's boutique from the first day. He had emerged from his store, drawn by the commotion, and unlike the guard, he instantly recognized the partially obscured face. His own face went stark white, sheer panic flaring in his eyes. The security guard swiveled his head, utterly bewildered, looking from the terrified manager back to the calm man in the black t-shirt. He struggled to connect the dots. This is Mr. Tom Hanks," the manager stammered, gesturing awkwardly, his voice trembling. Tom Hanks held up a hand, gently but firmly halting the manager's flustered explanation. "Yes," he confirmed, his voice clear and steady now, resonating in the widening circle of onlookers. "I am the owner of this mall." The words landed like hammer blows. The security guard froze completely, his bluster evaporating, replaced by rigid shock. His face became a mask of disbelief and dawning horror, his breathing shallow. Hanks took a deliberate step closer to the now paralyzed guard. "So," he repeated, his voice dropping slightly, becoming intensely personal, yet audible to everyone nearby. "Let's revisit your earlier statement. Tell me again, who exactly doesn't belong here?" The tension was electric. Customers had stopped shopping, forming a curious, murmuring crowd. Phones were overtly recording now, capturing the unfolding drama. The guard looked around wildly, his eyes darting from face to face, silently pleading for support or intervention that never came. He was utterly alone, exposed. "How many people?" Mr. Hanks pressed relentlessly, his calm demeanor making the questions even more impactful. "Have you judged and dismissed like this? How many potential customers, how many human beings, have you decided weren't good enough to walk these halls because of the clothes they wore or the way they looked?" The guard remained silent, seemingly unable to speak, trapped in the spotlight of his own actions. Mr. Hanks then calmly retrieved his phone, navigated to the mall's public review page, and held it up, angling the screen slightly so those nearby could glimpse the damningly low rating, 1.8 stars. "Perhaps," Mr. Hanks said, his voice ringing with quiet authority, "you and your superiors should spend less time policing appearances and more time reading what people actually think of the experience you provide." He began to read aloud, slowly and clearly. "Staff treats you like garbage if you don't look rich enough. I was asked to leave just for browse. Felt like a criminal. Security follows you around, making you uncomfortable. Beautiful mall, but the atmosphere is toxic unless you're dripping in designer labels." He lowered the phone, his gaze locking first onto the stunned security guard, then shifting to the pale, sweating boutique manager. "This," he stated with finality, letting the weight of the words sink in, "is the reputation you have built for my establishment. Your rules, or a complete lack of decent leadership." Just as the boutique manager opened his mouth to stammer another apology, a more imposing figure pushed through the crowd, the mall's general manager, Mr. Harrison. Alerted by frantic calls, he arrived flushed, his expensive suit slightly askew, his face a practiced mask of composed concern that crumbled rapidly as he recognized the unassuming man in the baseball cap now holding court. "Mr. Hanks!" Harrison exclaimed, rushing forward, hand outstretched, oozing false sincerity. "A pleasure. I had no idea you were visiting. I deeply apologize for any misunderstanding. If I had known..." Tom Hanks ignored the offered hand, cutting him off mid-sentence, his voice remaining steady, but losing its earlier softness, replaced now by a harder edge. "Known who I was?" he repeated, letting the implication hang heavy in the air. "So the issue isn't the deplorable behavior, but that it was directed at me? Is that the standard here? Treat people like dirt unless they might be someone important?" He gestured towards the silent, humiliated security guard. "What about him? What about the couple in the jewelry store yesterday? The young man in the food court? How were they treated when you weren't watching, Mr. Harrison?" The general manager blinked, flustered, searching for a plausible denial. The crowd murmured, sensing the shift from a personal grievance to a systemic indictment. Encouraged, other voices started to rise from the onlookers. "It's true," called a woman from the back. "They completely ignore you if you're not dressed a certain way." Another man added, "I tried to ask for directions once, and the employee actually rolled her eyes at me." The dam of silence, built on fear and intimidation, was definitively broken. People were sharing their own stories, nodding in agreement, their hushed complaints coalescing into a public testimony. Mr. Hanks turned his attention fully to Harrison, the architect of this toxic environment. "Were these your policies?" he demanded, his voice sharp. "Or just the culture you fostered through negligence and deliberate indifference?" Harrison began to bluster about maintaining standards and catering to a specific clientele, the same tired excuses that likely worked behind closed boardroom doors. But here in the open, confronted by the owner and a crowd of disgruntled customers, the justifications sounded hollow, pathetic. At that moment, Hank's associate, Mark, stepped forward quietly, holding a tablet. On the screen, clearly visible, were excerpts from internal employee surveys and exit interviews, damning evidence of Harrison's management style. Complaints about discrimination, favoritism, unrealistic pressure to judge customers, and a pervasive fear of retaliation, all systematically ignored or dismissed by Harrison himself. Mark highlighted specific directives attributed directly to the general manager, regarding managing perceptions and discouraging loitering by undesirable individuals. The exposure was complete. Harrison's face went from red to ashen. "This mall," Tom Hanks declared, his voice resonating with quiet power, addressing not just Harrison but everyone present, "is more than just an investment to me. It's a part of this community. And under your management," he fixed his gaze on Harrison, "it has become a place where people are judged, dismissed, and made to feel unwelcome based on superficialities. That is not just bad business, it's morally wrong." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Then, with cold finality, he said, "Mr. Harrison, consider your employment here terminated, effective immediately." Security, Hank's own detail, moved forward discreetly. The aftermath was swift. Harrison was escorted out. Hanks then requested an immediate all-hands meeting with every single employee, from cleaning staff to individual store managers. Standing before them later that day in the mall's central event space, without a microphone or podium, he spoke plainly. "I own this place," he repeated, "and frankly, I haven't been paying enough attention to what truly matters, how people are treated here. That ends today." He acknowledged the fear, the pressure they might have felt. He listened as several employees, emboldened, hesitantly shared their own experiences of witnessing or enduring unfair treatment. He announced the formation of an independent oversight committee, new mandatory training focused on inclusivity and respect, and a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination by staff or management. "This isn't just about fixing a PR problem," he asserted. "This is about fundamentally changing the culture here. We will treat everyone who walks through these doors with dignity. It won't happen overnight, but the change starts now. We start over, together." As Tom Hanks finally walked out of the mall late that evening, the air felt different, lighter. The tension that had crackled beneath the surface seemed to have eased. He saw a security guard smiling warmly while giving directions to a family, a store manager genuinely complimenting an employee on a display. These were small moments, fragile beginnings, but they were signs of hope. He put on his sunglasses, taking a deep breath of the evening air. What started as a quiet investigation into disturbing reports had ignited a necessary revolution. He knew the work was far from over, that rebuilding trust and truly changing a culture takes time and constant vigilance. But as he walked away from the gleaming facade, he felt not just the weight of ownership, but the profound responsibility that came with it. He wouldn't be an unseen owner any longer. He would be watching,